Hey there, everyone. So, my name is Adam. I'm talking to you here from PyTop in London. Very happy to be with all you guys today, and thanks to Pukraj as well and the HundrED team for making it happen. So, PyTop. PyTop is a creative learning company, and our mission is to inspire a generation of makers, which I think is particularly apt when framed by the conversation of preparing youth for today's globalized world, which, as you'll probably know, most of you, this is the HundrED theme for this month. So inspiring a generation of makers, what does that even mean? What do we do? I think this is probably a good place to start. So at PyTop, we mainly do three things. We make modular, go-anywhere computer hardware, we make pedagogical software, and we design projects and challenges that support learning by making. Learning by making is an active, student-led, hands-on approach to teaching and learning that goes beyond the screen, beyond the textbook. To give it its fancy name that some of you might be familiar with, it's called social constructionism. And so the learning by making movement is a movement grounded in the belief that a maker mindset is essential for developing the real-life practical skills learners need to thrive in a rapidly transforming world. A world that's characterized by automation, AI, and new employment opportunities based on creativity, collaboration, problem solving. We'll come back to these sorts of ideas when we talk about what a globalized world actually entails. But just to, once again, my name is Adam. I'm the Community Development Director here at PyTop, which means I'm responsible for growing a community of kindred spirits, people from around the world who share our ideology, which is why we've teamed up with HundrED and all of you guys tuning in now, so thanks for joining me. I thought what might be useful is to see how aligned we are, whether or not we're on the same page when it comes to some of the ideas that we at PyTop have around education. So I'm going to say a few things, and let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these things. So I've written a few things down. So we believe that learning is most effective when it is student-led, open-ended, and grounded in authentic contexts. So that's how we build agency, which is of fundamental importance if learning is to be sticky and meaningful. So that's one. We also believe that learning should be designed to offer hands-on, collaborative problem-solving opportunities. So that means that it's not just about following instructions or progressing through a curriculum, but about working together to make real-world impact and improvement. We also believe that any learning methodology or theory should practice low floors, which is essentially about accessibility, meaning there's no barrier to entry, it's easy to get started. High ceilings, which it permits projects to get to very complex and sophisticated levels should the learner progress in such a way. And wide walls, which essentially enables myriad different directions so that learners can follow their own interests. So we believe that any learning methodology should follow the practice of low floors, high ceilings, and wide walls. We also suggest that a maker mindset is critical for preparing learners to tackle an increasingly complex and challenging world. And so a maker mindset, to me at least, is bringing that can-do attitude that can make an idea a reality by working with others to identify problems, to design something, to fix it, and then to make it, to iterate and improve along the way. So that maker mindset is critical. But ultimately, we believe that the purpose of education is to prepare our members of society to thrive in a rapidly transforming world, not just to pass tests or to memorize facts. So if these sorts of ideas resonate with you, then we will get on famously, and you should reach out to me on here via the contact details that I'll share at the end of this, or just add me on Facebook or something. But right now we're going to talk a little bit about preparing youth for today's globalized world. And so what does that even mean anyway? Globalization is this process of interaction and integration, almost always, kind of by definition, enabled by technological developments. That means people, businesses, and even countries and governments around the world can take a global perspective on politics, trade, human rights, defense, just about everything. And that sounds great at face value, doesn't it? Because we're all one human race on planet Earth after all. But as with all things, it's not quite as easy as that. So we're currently at the precipice of what has been dubbed the Fourth Industrial Revolution, driven by these same technological developments and epitomized by things like self-driving cars, nanotechnology, gene editing, AI, automation, robotics, all things that we living in 2019 have increasingly direct experience with. And again, it all sounds great. All the world's information at our fingertips, food from any restaurant delivered to our door in minutes, suggestions of what we as consumers can purchase to make our lives that little bit more convenient, then an online megastore that sells whatever that product might be and can deliver it the very next day or even the same day if you order early enough. But it isn't all rosy. With technological proliferation comes, at least some of the time, technological unemployment. And with that come disengaged, disillusioned members of society who are increasingly finding themselves unskilled to re-enter the workforce and slipping off that globalized grid. So if education's purpose is to get today's young people thriving tomorrow, then I would say that that job is getting harder and harder to achieve. Even the working landscape is becoming more and more fluid. It's so fast changing that whole industries are collapsing and emerging at unprecedented rates. And to put that to the test, kind of when was the last time you used a travel agent or a phone book, a VHS player, a landline telephone, a Kodak camera, even a postbox? Some people that I know don't even use a pen regularly anymore. It's impossible to keep up with this rate of change. And once your job becomes automized or redundant, it's increasingly difficult to recover and find work again. And that's not even the end of it. So this Facebook Live session is going to get a bit gloomier before it gets better, but it will get better. There is a happy ending. You just have to wait for it. So at the same time as all this is happening, at the same time that all this is going on, we're also facing existential crises, the likes of which modern humans, at least, have never faced before. The sorts of problems that can wipe us out. The Earth surely won't die, but humans won't be around to enjoy it. And who knows, maybe that's a good thing. If we've really wiped out 60% of species since 1970s, then maybe the planet's better off without us. But I think that's a conversation for another day and another theme. So we'll move swiftly on. But things like climate change, population growth, pollution, migration, antibiotic resistance, chronic disease, obesity, they're all at unprecedented levels and showing no signs of slowing down anytime soon. Some of the more conservative research carried out by the UN, and indeed some of the researchers and business leaders here at PyTop, working with the UN, predict that we will have 1 billion climate change refugees by 2050. That's a conservative guess. These people are largely coming from the global south, as that same research also suggests that it's these regions that will find it harder to adapt to both the existential and technological changes that we're talking about today. And for context, we have about 65 million refugees right now. And we're not handling that very well, are we really? So imagine 1 billion people seeking refuge all at the same time. There is a reason why we are seeing a rise in movements like Extinction Rebellion and veganism, at the same time that we're witnessing an increase in populist and nationalist thinking and movements, and an emphasis being put on conversations like borders and immigration and building walls. The world is a pretty confused place at the moment. We don't really know what to do, and we certainly aren't preparing today's youth to tackle these problems adequately. And if that carries on, we are well and truly screwed, like end of the world as we know it type screwed. So what are we supposed to do? If a school is to prepare people for all of this, what do we need to change? The short answer is a lot, but that's not very helpful. The thing is, whilst all of this change and development has been going on, the one industry that has remained largely unchanged and unresponsive is education. And the reasons behind that are many and debatable, but what is certain is that learning a bunch of facts in any given curriculum, regurgitating them come exam time to try and get an arbitrary grade handed out by examining bodies and education publishers, who are the same people that make the textbooks, by the way, isn't going to cut it anymore. Firstly, as a model, we already know that this doesn't work, right? As teachers are forced to teach to tests, not what's important. And that can't be right. But secondly, because things are changing so fast, a lot of what learners encounter in textbooks and in the classroom is out of date before they've even left the building anyway. And then the amount of times people are going to have to reinvent themselves or reskill themselves in the future to remain relevant and to continue to contribute to society makes school in its current format and education at large, kind of in its current format, pretty useless and outdated. And all of this contributes to the idea that we should be focusing much less on the what we learn and much more on the how we acquire that knowledge, how we learn it, which is easy to say, but it's quite a dramatic change. In fact, we need a dramatic change. Buckminster Fuller said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete." And I love that quote. I feel like it is, personally speaking, I feel it's especially true in education. We've been trying to slowly change the course of this most bureaucratic of industries for as long as I can remember. And any change has been modest and isolated in most cases. Even the OECD is now agreeing that we need a shift away from the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic towards the 4 C's: creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And this is something we've been saying at PyTop for quite a while, but now the winds of change are catching up. And this is what we're solving for at PyTop. This is what we're designing solutions to try and bring about. This is the raison d'etre for learning by making, or social constructionism. I'm picking up and applying theories developed by the likes of Piaget, Vygotsky, Seymour Papert, especially. PyTop have built a learning framework, a philosophy, a learner-centered approach that prioritizes things like playing, exploring, trying, building, making and iterating, and emphasizing the application as the essential means by which people learn and grow. So not the what, but the how. And ironically, this is actually nothing new. It's actually been the primary way of learning for humans for thousands of years. It's not until we industrialized education that we lost our way and we started getting obsessed with averages, with testing, with standardization. And it's worth pointing out here, as I talk about PyTop, you don't actually need PyTop modular computers and the software to bring about this change. It is true that we have designed all of our products and services with this philosophy in mind, but it is also true that you can practice learning by making with plasticine, with sticky tape, with wood, with other computers, whatever you've got in your cupboards, basically. A maker mindset can be developed whether one makes a poem, a sandcastle, a computer program, that's paraphrasing Papert, in fact, or just about anything else. It's all about how you make, not what you make. The what is up to the learners, and that's where the stickiness and the agency comes in. Giving learners ownership and authorship of their learning experience develops that agency and leads to actual knowledge being retained in a way that's flexible enough to apply it to other scenarios. And I think that's the key for how we prepare youth for today's globalized world. So we couldn't possibly know all of the things that they're going to have to deal with. And even in my own experience, 15 or 20 years ago, I could tell you all of the elements in the periodic table in the right place, the right short form configuration, and now I wouldn't know where to begin. But somewhat trivially, I can still tell you the Manchester United lineup for the Champions League final in Rome in 1999 against Bayern Munich, not because that raw information is any easier to remember, but because that meant something to me. So what we have designed at PyTop creates room for learner agency and personalization by focusing on the how and not the what, empowering learners to solve real-world problems in their hyper-local communities, or if they prefer, or if it's more appropriate, to tackle regional or even a global perspective. They can do all of these things with this framework. They're in the driving seat, and that is entirely the point. So let me just explain a little bit about what that looks like in practice, because it's easy to talk about these things conceptually, but often what's missing is the detail, and the devil's in the detail, right? So there are 4 steps to our constructionist method that can be used in any scenario, any subject, though we do prefer, obviously, subjects to be kind of de-siloed and approached in an interdisciplinary way, but let's go one step at a time. The framework's designed as a scaffold, to be used as a scaffold, to guide teachers and learning designers through any given project or challenge. And the steps are assemble, tinker, play, and share. I'll just quickly talk to you about these things, just so you can get a picture of what we mean by these words. Assemble is direct instruction, essentially, because we aren't saying that direct instruction is bad. We've never said that. What we're saying is that there is simply a time and a place for it, and that we need to make sure that we move beyond it. The time and the place for direct instruction is at the beginning, in this assemble phase, where we will give step-by-step instructions and procedures so that learners can acquire a hitherto unacquired or unpracticed skill. And that could be anything from connecting electronic components, writing a bit of code, reading articles, answering a question, building something out of wood, creating a simple digital artifact like a photograph, and so on and so on. It could be anything. At the end of this assemble stage, every learner has made the same thing. They've had the same experience, they've acquired the same skills, and this is important for reasons that you'll soon hear. The next stage is tinker, which moves beyond direct instruction and into guided practice. And here learners take what they have learned from assemble, and they make simple modifications and changes to their projects. So to continue the examples from before, that could be something like connecting components in a different place, or using maybe a different sensor or an additional sensor, changing the values and the variables in code, finding some related articles and comparing them with others, reframe or recolor photographs or digital artifacts, and so on. You get the point that at the end of this stage, the learner or the group of learners begins to personalize and vary from one another. So each is starting to put their own identity on these projects and starting to create something different, essentially. Play, the third stage, is when learners start to really take over and explore different configurations, leading to new projects altogether. So by taking what they've learned from the first 2 phases and applying it to new situations, they're able to go on these self-sustaining journeys of discovery and invention. And again, to continue our examples, that might be adding new components and sensors, or writing more functions to augment your computer program, to find other relevant articles and construct your own, quoting others, to photograph a new subject to tell a different story. The point is that at the end of this stage, projects would have taken on new identities, and now each project in the class could be vastly different. The direct instruction is gone, has been replaced by facilitation. So teachers are now using things like neutral questioning designed to empower and encourage learners to go for it and to own things. Though remember, because the starting point was the same, there's still enough connective tissue between these projects to benefit from a shared discourse community. And we'll come back to this idea in a second. Because the final stage is share. And this is where those fusion skills, the 4 C's that we talked about earlier, really come into their own. As learners open up their projects to the community, and that community might be other people in that one room, in the classroom. It could be a bigger community of learners on PyTop's software platform, or indeed any other resource of learners, wherever people are collaborating and working together. Here, critical feedback is given and received. Learners can collaborate and combine projects to make mega versions. They must deliberate and think critically about how to do that and how to improve and join their creations and maybe even compete with others. And as this stage continues in an open-ended fashion, projects will become unrecognizable from those first stages. Yet the common starting point means that there will still be enough commonalities for meaningful collaboration, for shared discourse, and most importantly, for meaningful assessment. And it sounds easy when you say it like that. It's just 4 steps. But it isn't easy, and it especially isn't easy if you're a teacher who has been in the classroom for years doing things a certain way. In fact, this kind of represents a really significant step change in how you may have done things before. And I think the things to try and get your head around and appreciate is that with learning by making, teachers are transforming from content delivery machines to facilitators of exploration and discovery. So imagine in one classroom, the teacher has a lesson plan where they know what's going to happen down to the minute. I've seen some pretty rigid and impressive in their own right lesson plans. You know, they're familiar with all of the course content. They can anticipate any question. They feel prepared for anything that might happen. And after all, they've probably delivered this lesson hundreds of times and they've seen it all before. So it's pretty hard to surprise them. But now imagine a PyTop classroom or a learning by making classroom where students are directing the learning. The teacher can't possibly know what questions are coming or even what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes, because how could they if the students are in the driving seat? They can't necessarily predict what the learners want to build or make, and therefore they can't predict all of the things they're going to need to troubleshoot later. And this can be terrifying. Going from being that authoritative class leader with all of the knowledge in their back pocket, they now have to become this facilitator who has to empower and encourage learners to try, to iterate, to experiment, to figure out stuff for themselves. And it might be scary, but also imagine the other side of this. Imagine the freedom of breaking free from lesson plans. Imagine that you don't need to create them anymore. And imagine breaking free from curricula and marking the same work, the same papers over and over again. Assessment moves from this repetitive exercise of marking papers to listening to learners demonstrate their understanding through conversation and presentation and real life projects. And having seen it in real life, not just in books. We did write a book about it, by the way. This is something you can find on the PyTop website, which goes into great detail on all of this stuff. But not just from books and from PyTop HQ. I've seen this in real life, and it is a wonderful thing, especially clearly for the learners, because the agency is there and they get to kind of direct and dictate what it is that they do. But for the teachers, almost more so, being able to break free from the shackles of traditional education and actually empower meaningful learning experiences. Because let's face it, that's what teachers get into this game for. It's not because they want to ruin people's lives or do any of this overly repetitive direct instruction. They're there to try and help us figure out how to prepare young people to thrive in a globalized world. And this framework can help them do that. Learning by making can help them do that. And it can be applied to any learning environment, in schools, in makerspaces, anywhere else, in fact, that learning takes place. So we design hardware and software with this philosophy in mind, but as previously stated, you can bring it to life with whatever you have handy. And we also have certifications for learning designers. Learning designers they could be teachers, they could be program leaders, they could be Fab Lab people or makerspace leaders. We have certifications for learning designers and for trainers, and they are designed to empower you to bring that philosophy to life in your daily practice, regardless of what stuff you have, what infrastructure you have at your disposal. And this is one of the things that I'm responsible for. So if that sounds interesting, please do let me know, and we'll figure out how to get you on one of the next certification courses. We're running these things all the time. But we do firmly believe that adopting this approach to how we learn can inspire